Rats at ICC. I'm here to analyze a game between cesaralexander and santiagoelawad, played in the Team4545 League. This was played in team event 60 in the first round and was selected as the game of the week. It's a pretty interesting and entertaining game. Let's have a look. Slav defense, very popular in Team 45 League. You'll find a lot of my videos cover the Slav. And A4 is played to stop black from playing B5 and trying to hang on to that pawn. And a normal Queen's Gambit accepted, black can't do that, yet in variations of the Slav, black can. They've discovered A4 is necessary. And in just a moment, the game is going to pick up a very interesting strategic imbalance, and we'll see right here. I think it's this move. Let's see. Black has 39.23 on his clock, and his clock goes up 11 seconds. So he spent 34 seconds on this move, which is probably a mistake. Now, let's back it up a little bit before we get into this. Let's just look at this position. Is it book? I don't know. That doesn't matter. But what's the one thing you want to do in a game of chess? Get your pieces developed, okay? That's your first objective. I believe if black just castles here, black will be fine. White will continue his development. Probably white will castle. And then there comes a point when black needs to figure out how to get this bishop into play. The most obvious way seems to me to go ahead and pick up a tempo on the bishop, make it move somewhere. Let's just bring it back here for the fun of it. And now black can opt to bring his bishop out, maybe put it on F5. I don't know, that would allow E4. Then D4 becomes a little weak, but white should be able to cover that. And we have a game of chess. It should be even. But C5 invites white to try to capitalize on the fact that black hasn't castled. And white makes a sacrifice here, which is totally sound. I'm not sure if I would directly look for it. Is my first candidate move, but because it involves several moves deep. Normally, I focus first on a developing move, and then I'll look elsewhere. C5 would cause me to consider that black may be trying to exchange here, or that maybe black wants white to exchange on C5. Now, generally speaking, white shouldn't take on C5. Why improve the position of a black piece, okay? Unless you can gain something concrete from it. But let's see how long white takes on his move. Okay, he's got 45.56. If you want to try to solve it on your own, go ahead. Just pause the video. Okay, if you're back, here's the move white plays. It's very interesting. Bishop takes check, and here he's taken 7 minutes and seconds plus his increment working it out. And suddenly black is a little surprised here. He's basically got to take the bishop or put his king on F8 and play a pawn down. And the rest is kind of easy to see. The knight comes into play, and the knight is trying to get to E6. So let's look at that. It's got a nice fork, but after knight E6, the queen say comes out to B6, and you take the bishop. The knight doesn't have a way out, and white's going to have to determine if he can get anywhere from here. I think it's a little difficult for white to try to prove any advantage here. So let's go back to the main position. White just simply makes a checkmate threat that black must deal with. And now the threat is to play knight E6. And after knight takes on E6, black won't have king F7 at his disposal. So black's move is basically more or less forced. Now white picks up a second pawn for the piece he sacrificed, and the black queen is tempoed. And black chooses to come out this way and allow white a knight check. And so suddenly, after 14 moves, we've got a pretty interesting imbalance here. For the moment, white's ahead the exchange. Let's see, white has 7 pawns, black has 5. So white's up a substantial bit of material here, and black doesn't really have any development or counterplay. Let's see how black starts fighting his way back into this game. Uh, if this knight is won, if white can save this knight, white will have a winning game. But that's easier said than done, as we'll see. Okay, black makes an exchange here, and the one thing missing from the white game that let's just eyeball this position right here before black played c5. I was recommending black should castle and white would castle. Well, as it turned out, black's not allowed to castle, but white hasn't yet. And why hasn't white castled yet? Well, it's because he's been embarking on a little tour to collect some material. And white needs to think about getting castled here in the next few moves. Now, the pawn is not on the take. White can't take it. It's illegal. He has exposed his king to check. But he's able to redeploy his knight. And for the moment, white's up the exchange. And if he can save that knight, he'll be fine. Okay, so now black brings a piece in play. It's about the only move he could play. There's really not much else to do. I mean, how's black going to try to justify this? He's got to win this knight on a8, and to do that, he's got to get his king off the back rank and his bishop on c8 off the back rank, so his rook can come over there and collect it, or find a way maybe get the queen up to e5 and back to b8, and it takes it. But then that queen gets a little out of play. So here's the critical point where white kind of missed his chance for an advantage. What would you play if you had white here? Well, you've got to move the queen, and you might want to pause the video and see where you want to put the queen. Now, it looks like it's a reasonable move, but I don't think it's enough. What white should play here is queen a3. Now, it doesn't look like a very obvious move necessarily because you're putting the queen off to the side. But what this move does is it puts a pin on this black knight. White will just trade queens if left to his own device. If black moves that and leaving white with just easy play. Let me just show you. There's nothing making black put the knight here, but I just want to illustrate the point. Because now white's threatening to get his knight out of there, and white still has 6 pawns, black has 5. Black probably doesn't have enough for the exchange. Now let's see, can black do anything to try to trap that knight? Well, one problem with a6 is it weakens the b6 square, and the knight might hop back and get in. Let's take a look. King d7 cuts off the knight, but now the knight's threatening to come into b6 and escape, and black still isn't threatening it. Now maybe knight d5 to stop the knight from coming to b6, but if anything, white can always play a5, and even if he has to lose a pawn getting that knight out, white's going to be up at the exchange, and everything will be hunky-dory. Okay, so let's back it up. So essentially, black can't move that knight, and what else can black do? Well, let's try putting the bishop on e6. That way, the king can probably safely come up to f7. But now this knight starts finding ways to get out. He's trying to get out, and he'll happily exchange himself. So where's black going to put his bishop? c4 looks a little risky. Maybe it's going to have to come back to f7. And now white will, well, wait, he can't take the pawn now. The knight's hanging on c7. Let's see. The goal is to get this knight out. This might be just good point to stop and castle, but then the question is black threatening a6, removing the defender of the knight on c7. Let's see. I know queen a3 just smells right. It just smells like the right move. How about Uh, if anything, you can always save that knight back just to move. Let's delay that. What if white grabs this pawn just because he can? Okay. Um, the knight still remains pinned, and now we've cleared the b6 square. And if black goes and threatens to take the knight, white just brings it back to c4. I mean b6, eyeballing c4. We can't get there yet. Queen c7, you have a5, and white should win. So queen c4, and now black gets bishop e6 in. Now it's with tempo on the queen. White doesn't have a free move like he did before. So the queen's he's sent the queen here to collect a pawn. Let's just back it up slightly. Queen e3, bishop e6. Aside from the fact that white has knight takes a7, which seems to suffice, white could also castle. And I don't think white. Let's go forward. Queen a3, bishop e6. Aside from castling, black might try. Aside not castling, black might try bishop takes e3. This just develops the white bishop, although it's not threatening to take the knight on c5 because of the pin, but the queen is. How's white black going to continue here? He needs to cover the knight. b6 or knight fe4 would do that. But let's see, b6. What if white just castles here? And now white's trying to get his knight out of there. Bishop b7. This might be a good point to take that guy. Okay. Now pawn takes. And let's see. This gets very complex. Let's go attack the queen. Queen probably needs to stay on the second rank so that if this knight comes to c7, we can kick out. But I think white's going to end up saving his piece. Yeah, look at that. Boom, check. Game pretty much over. So white had some chances in that line. But here he's collected the pawn, but suddenly black has a fork. Now, if the queen was on a3, there was no fork. So white's still going about his business trying to get that knight out of there. But suddenly black gets a powerful check, and his queen is in play. And here's the point where I think white drops the ball. The correct move is to castle. Watch what he does. He gives a check, and this seems to lose. And I think if white castles, it's a fight. Let's discuss this for a second. White has 6 pawns, black has 3. If black can win that knight, he's got 2 pieces for the rook, but it's not entirely clear how he's going to win that knight. But I think black is okay here. We'll see here in a moment. Let's see what's black do here. I think it comes back with the game, but it'll show up with the game because white tries a different variation and we'll come back. White checks first. Now his queen's being tempoed, and he gets a check here. But you see his knight's now on the take. And now black just simply has 2 pieces for the rook, and most of his pieces have come to life. No, let me rephrase that. Black is 2 pieces ahead because he's won the knight. Okay, white has 2 pieces, black has 4. Yeah, I'm just losing count because black picked up that rook. So black is now winning this game, and white just doesn't have enough. I think he's going to get a piece back here in a second, but and we'll come back to that point. There's the fork which wins back a piece, but it's not enough. And let me come back here and we'll review this. Black has this choice: move the bishop or take the knight. He decides to dump the bishop for a pawn with check and then pick up the knight. And now black has a knight for a pawn, in effect. You know, the knight and the bishop neutralize and are knight for 2 pawns, and white's pawns are weak. But let's back it up a little bit. See, the queen b8 check was a grave error. White needs to castle, and you know, neglecting castling is what killed him. Black will have, let's see. Well, actually, I'm kind of mistaken on the count here. I keep thinking white has an extra rook. He doesn't. White will save his knight here. Let's go ahead and let's bring this knight into play, and we know white's going to get his out. I mean, it's still a game of chess here. The outcome is far from determined. From a material standpoint, it's even. White has 3 pawns for the piece, and there's a lot of wood on the board. We've only exchanged off for black. He's exchanged off a rook. That's it. White's exchanged off a rook and 1 bishop. So the outcome here is unclear. We don't know who's going to come out ahead. It just comes down to who's going to make a mistake. So let's just go forward and see how. Wait, where is that going? Let's see, revert. Okay, there we go. Check. This ends up losing the knight on a7 for nothing. And now just a matter, although white wins a piece back, black is consolidating his position and is starting to collect more pawns for the piece than he should have had. And now it's just a matter of attrition. You know, the pawns start falling, and black achieves a winning game. Now, one disappointing thing at this point, if you look at the clocks, they're both close to the original 45 minutes. So they are taking time on some of the key moves, but they're not taking enough time on all the moves. Let's back it up again. When white played queen b8 check, which, you know, instead of castling, his clock went down 1 minute and 11 seconds. So it took close to 2 minutes on the move, but he could have spent 20 minutes on the move if he had to, and still had plenty of time to conduct a reasonable game. 10 minutes should have been enough to see the continuation. See, here you have to realize your queen's under duress. You can't go to b7 and stay on the knight because b7 hangs. And here, the knight is just on the take. And then white castles here. He does take about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes on the move. No, about 1 minute on the move. See, his clock goes down 30 seconds. Yeah, so 1.25 minutes. But that's just giving black a piece. So white had enough time to solve this, and let's just kind of watch through it. There's really not much more to the game once black consolidates and starts collecting pawns. White doesn't have enough pieces to generate anything. Ideally, the only way white can save this is trade rooks, trade off all the pawns, including giving up the bishop for black's last pawn, and leaving black with 2 knights against a king, which you can't win. But then there's the possibility that we'll talk about it I'll bring it up when we get a little closer to it. Okay, let's wait for some pawns to fall. But see, we're getting rid of the pawns. It might be a position. Suppose, well, I'll say it just yet. Okay, now he's stopping it from taking G4, the king on f3, stopping that. But what I was trying to say is, suppose white could win that pawn and then sacrifice this bishop for this pawn when it starts to advance. Now black's out of pawns, but the problem is white still has pawns. There's a theoretical ending of knight of two knights versus a bishop. I'm sorry, two knights versus a king and pawn. And that position can be winning for the knights. The method is block the pawn with one of the knights, then force the white king to the corner and stalemate him. But just before you stalemate him, you release the knight that's blockading the pawn, and that pawn starts running. And you checkmate the enemy king at the moment the pawn queens, or just before it does. And you say, well, how often does that happen? Well, it actually happened in Team 45 League. Around Team 48, 49, somewhere in there. And it was naturally selected game of the week where one player won with it. You'll have to do a little research, but it's a fun ending. But unfortunately, white just can't get to that step where he can make black prove he can win that way. The white pawns are targets, the black pawns aren't. White can't liquidate that second pawn, or that first pawn, so that his bishop can then give up for the other pawn. So now that pawn is just going to go in unescorted. Taking it with the bishop doesn't do anything because black still has a pawn on g4. But here, they're moving quick. They have more time left than when they started. So it's not a case of where one side played blitz chess. They certainly didn't. But at the same time, both sides didn't take the time they could have, and I would like to see more than that. Keep in mind, a good game of chess should last you at least 3 hours. And Team 45 League doesn't give you 3 hours, but you can still play a good game. Your E-time, it makes the game around a 2.5 hour game. And that's how long it should last. This game, 50 moves times 45 seconds means about 40. They played off the increment about 40 minutes each. The game barely lasted an hour and a half. It's not a long game. Keep in mind, any player that won an international title played games 5 hours and longer to get that title. They play, I guess the new FIDE time control is 40 moves in 90 minutes with a 30-second increment every move. And that will mean if you reach time control at move 40, nearly 2 hours have elapsed off your clock, and you still have chess to play. So it's easy to see that a serious game will last over 5 hours. And anyway, well played. I think both sides showed creativity and imagination here, and both sides did try their best. Just takes a mistake to lose a game. Both sides made mistakes, but white made the last one. And I thank you so much for your time. Take care.